and it
Then
goes from
Milei came on because he was such a weird thing, especially in television. There were already some classic liberal or libertarian economists, not exactly out loud, saying, no, this is wrong because of this or that. But Milei had a magic, I would say. It was something quite entertaining, really. Most of the channels at the time will bring him in, not only because of his economic perspective, but because he was pretty engaging. And at the beginning, for example, in many of these battles, I don't know if like the View or something like it, where there are multiple people, and sometimes they all pin against one. Well, they will put like 10 against Millet, and Millet will rebuke them all. And he had a character, he still has, but more chill these days. But yeah, he will say, "No, you parasite, you vampire, blood sucking vampire."
yes,
He
vampire.
was wild.
Yeah,
Yeah, and he said in the face of senators, of governors. I mean, he went all in.
yeah, yeah.
Buy my novel, Escape from the Village, from major booksellers online. Go to escapevillage.com. Subscribe to my Substack. Go to fountainheadforum.substack.com. Thank you.
Welcome to the party, pal. This is Fountainhead Forum 198. I'm talking to Chinchilla. He lives in Buenos Aires, and we're going to do a speech analysis. He's a good libertarian down there. This is going to be Javier Milei's speech at the Milken Institute, which was back in on May 6th. It looks like this is a good speech of Milei from Milei, and it really again shows how Milei always knows how to read the room and know his audience. What do you think about all that?
Well, he's been a professor at economics for more than 20 years, and he's relatively, how to say it, he's kind of accustomed to read the audience. So, a lot of young, if not, well, high school or, university kids, I guess. So you need to keep them engaged. So he always tries to spice up a little the
Yeah,
speeches in general.
but I do think he knows how to gear his message to his audience. So we're gonna go with this speech right here.
Yes, yes, of course.
Okay, yeah, okay. At the Milken Institute, here's the introduction, and this was on the. Like I said, this was on the 6th of on the 6th of May. Yes, streamed live. So. Also, I noticed he went without glasses this time, so he must have already memorized his speech, or what? What do you think about all that?
No, he always writes his own speeches or think them through, and usually what he has written is just what's the word for it? But basically, it's the core words or the core concepts of his speech. He mostly think them, not exactly write them, but just has like memory reminders of what is the next topic of the speech, and then he goes.
Yeah. Also, since Chinchilla is having video issues, I'm turning my video off as well. So we are playing a video, but we're not going to show her on video. So here we go. This is only about a half hour, so it's a pretty easy speech. Yeah, here we go.
Yes, yes.
Oh, and he put his glasses on. Okay.
Yeah. He
Buenos
usually
días a
always.
todos.
He's saying,
Quiero comenzar.
uh, mm, yeah, yeah. He's just saying good morning to everyone, and then he starts.
Okay, yeah.
Por agradecer al Milken Institute, a todos los involucrados en la organización de este evento y personalmente a Michael Milken por hacer este encuentro posible. El Instituto Milken ha sido durante décadas una de las pocas organizaciones de inserción internacional que se ha mantenido incólume defendiendo los verdaderos principios del capitalismo y las ideas de la libertad, algo lamentablemente escaso en el mundo de hoy.
He talks about how this institute's defending freedom, and it says, unfortunately, scarce in today's world, which is true. If people don't know, Michael Milken was an investor and financer who was actually prosecuted back in the 80s, although some people say he was really I don't know enough about the case, but some people say he was a victim and not really doing any harm, but he was, but others say it's really hard to say, but he's funding this Milken Institute now. So this is their global conference. So yeah, here we go.
Hace algunos meses me paré frente al mundo en el Foro Económico de Davos y les transmití una profunda preocupación por el camino que Occidente ha tomado en los últimos años. Lo que dije en aquella presentación, que aparentemente fue muy comentada, es que Occidente está en peligro. Está en peligro porque sus líderes hace tiempo se alejaron de
Talks about the West being in danger because its leaders have been I don't know if this is, have been, moving away from free markets.
Yeah. He's making a reference to his previous speech on the World Economic Forum when he said the West is in danger.
Yeah. Yeah, and we did do a previous analysis of the World Economic Forum speech. That was definitely very interesting. He really took it to him. This is it looks like he realizes that this audience is going to be pretty sympathetic. So I think he's not taking on the confrontational approach that he might take on elsewhere. But yeah, here we go.
Las ideas de la libertad, ideas que hicieron de Occidente la hazaña civilizatoria más importante de la historia de la humanidad. Y en vez de defender las ideas que generaron la prosperidad de la que todos aquí gozan, escuchan cantos de sirena que conducen inexorablemente al socialismo y en consecuencia a la pobreza. Les dije que lo sé a ciencia cierta, porque vengo de Argentina, donde todo esto tristemente ya ocurrió a lo largo de los últimos 100 años.
And he's now, mentioned that freedom made the West prosperous, and now, going back to socialism, it could be poverty. And he's going to bring up the story of his own country, Argentina, in the past 100 years, which is unfortunate. But, by the way, too, as we're doing this, we also have 6 months of budget surpluses now. So I think he's doing what he set out to do. What do you think?
From his policy, yeah, he's advancing on his agenda. It's slower pace than many would like, but it was understandable. He has the legislative corps, I would say. Let's say the amount of legislator and senator that his party possesses, the smallest one that any president in our history ever possessed. So yeah, he has to do a lot of alliances or deals, so to speak. So yeah, his agenda is moving slowly, but the core parts, what he really needs to move, it's advancing. So yeah. And the public spending is always month to month going down. It's just a beast. And he's constantly through the different ministries, which are now currently 8, because at some point he reduced them to 7 because one of the ministries presented many issues. So he just removed the minister and joined into economics, and then he created a new ministry to deregulate the economy, specifically to work constantly on such matters, because he thought it would be the best way to proceed. So yeah, the last time our country had 8 ministries was during the presidency of Julio Argentino Roca. It was like 105, 110 years ago. So back on track.
En algún sentido, los argentinos somos profetas de un futuro apocalíptico que ya hemos vivido. Todas estas discusiones de hoy, basadas en supuestos deseos bien pensantes de querer ayudar al prójimo, basada en una idea errónea acerca de la naturaleza y la función del Estado, sostenidas por teorías económicas que han sido largamente refutadas por los datos y la evidencia empírica, nosotros los argentinos las vivimos hace 100 años y lamentablemente aplicar esas ideas nos han llevado a la ruina. El resultado ya todos lo conocen, de tener el PBI per cápita más alto del mundo a tener un país donde el 60% de la población es pobre y más del 15% es indigente.
Yeah, this is all true.
Si bien la Argentina debe ser tal vez el caso más paradigmático de la historia del mundo occidental del fracaso de las ideas colectivistas, no es la excepción, sino la regla. Siempre que se ha intentado el socialismo ha sido un fracaso en lo económico, un fracaso en lo social, un fracaso en lo cultural y además, como es una filosofía que va en contra de la naturaleza humana, no han tenido otro mecanismo para implementarlo que asesinar a 150 millones de seres humanos.
Yeah, he always says those numbers against socialism, communism from, I guess, the last 6 years, especially during his time as a TV, what's the word, panelist now, but essentially when you are invited to many programs to speak of economics, though most of them were led by the socialist hosts, so they were pretty hostile towards him. So he always went with the big guns.
Yeah, he came out saying, how socialism had killed 150 million, and it was certainly correct about that. It's a very revealing topic here. I mean, it's just 150 million that includes the Soviet Union and China and Mao Zedong, and of course, if you go by percentage,
and then you can go on Pol Pot, Kim I guess Kim Il Sung. I don't remember which ones were the one that started in North Korea, but yeah, the list goes on and on and on.
If you go by percentage of the population, Pol Pot is actually the worst.
Yeah, like 75%, right?
More like 25%, but yeah, it's pretty bad. But yeah, here we go again. Yeah.
Ah, yeah.
Pero hoy vengo aquí a la meca del capitalismo a hacer una crítica al socialismo, sino que vengo a hacer una defensa del capitalismo frente a ustedes, que son los verdaderos héroes de la historia del progreso occidental. Si bien hoy está sujeto a una crítica corriente, defender el modelo de la libertad realmente no es difícil, porque la relación directa entre la aplicación del capitalismo de libre mercado y la explosión de prosperidad que la humanidad ha vivido en los últimos 250 años, es muy fácil de demostrar. Si uno mira un gráfico de la evolución del PBI per cápita a lo largo de la historia de la humanidad, uno estaría viendo un gráfico con la forma de un palo de hockey, una función que se mantuvo constante durante casi el 90% del tiempo y se dispara exponencialmente a partir del siglo XIX.
He again talks about the last 250 years, and he's right about how much prosperity has just come about. It's been remarkable, especially in the 19th century.
Yeah. With it was already the second industrial revolution and all. Just amazing how much the technological leap helped people live out of poverty in general.
O sea que desde el año 0 hasta el año 1800 aproximadamente, el PBI per cápita del mundo prácticamente se mantuvo constante. Pero a partir del siglo XIX y a raíz de la revolución industrial, el PBI per cápita no solo aumentó, sino que lo hizo de forma exponencial. Es más, en los últimos 150 años se multiplicó por 15 y generando una explosión de riqueza que sacó de la pobreza al 90% de la población del mundo, llegando al punto de que para el año 2020 solo el 5% de la población global vivía en la pobreza extrema. Lejos de ser la causa de nuestros problemas, el capitalismo de libre empresa como sistema económico es la mejor herramienta que como especie hemos conocido para terminar con el hambre, la pobreza y la indigencia a lo largo y a lo ancho de todo el planeta. Pero si bien el éxito del capitalismo es fácil de demostrar, lo que no es tan accesible para muchos es el contrafáctico. ¿A dónde conduce la adopción sistemática de un modelo colectivista, incluso dentro de las reglas laxas del capitalismo? Como dije antes, tal vez el mejor ejemplo sea el ejemplo argentino. Nuestra historia entera es un testimonio de lo que puede ocurrir cuando se abandona el modelo de la libertad y se lo reemplaza por experimentos.
He again talks about how Argentina is a great example of how capitalism worked and socialism has failed.
Yeah. Especially, I guess it will be after the 80s, 60s. When the new constitution, the one that made us into one of the richest countries in the world, came into effect. In 30, 40 years, we just annihilated analphabetism. Essentially people not being able to read or write. And well, it helped in general a lot. It was a succession of good governments that follow long-term agendas for the better of the country, and not a lot of economic intervention. In general, it was just free market. Another curious fact is it was already at beginnings of the 18th century when we had the revolution here, La Revolución de Mayo, and it was like 3 years after the declaration that we already essentially abolished slavery, and allowing, first of all, it was the prohibition to import black people. Then it was the liberty of wombs, which was essentially that people could have relationship with about anyone without issues, legal or otherwise. Then it was the final measure was to make the son of the slaves, once they came of age, to be essentially free, so free men. So that, I guess it was by 1920, 1930, it was essentially eradicated. Besides, the population at that time, more or less, I don't know, it was 10%, 20% of the population at the time. It was like 10,000 black people. And one of the first measures that were taken to free people was to summon whoever was willing to join in the liberation armies led by San Martin. They were called Libertos. If I'm not mistaken, it was like 3,000 men, black men, they joined the army. And it was a very perilous job because the army was like reassembled 20 times, one after each battle, more or less. Yeah. It was very bloody, but they always won. At a high cost, of course.
I had no idea that Argentina had a history of slavery. And find that
intriguing. It was not very prolific because we were very far away from the economic or commerce hubs of slavery or commerce in general. So it wasn't very practical. Besides, here we had a lot of indigenous populations, so there were other ways to, employ people, the good ones and the bad ones, because, 200 years ago, it wasn't exactly pretty times. But yeah, fortunately, the racial issues that in other countries happened at the time were not very prolific in our country because, essentially our founding fathers imitated your founding fathers, and it had a lot of fight with the central government of the time, the revolution. If I'm not mistaken, it was La Primera Junta, or the first junta or joint. It was the first government from, at the time, was the provinces of the River Plate, essentially the United Provinces of the River Plate, more or less the name. And there were already a lot of infights for different reasons, but fortunately, many people were saved because of imitating greatness, essentially.
Yes. Yeah, okay, let's keep going. Yeah, of course, Brazil had a very, very large slave population nearby.
Colectivistas. Cuando la Argentina sancionó y comenzó a aplicar su primera constitución liberal, allá por el año 1860, tardamos solo 35 años en convertirnos en una potencia mundial. Pasamos a ser de un país de bárbaros a ser el primero de la historia humana en erradicar el analfabetismo, con un Producto Bruto Interno total superior a la suma de Brasil, México, Paraguay y Perú.
More than Brazil, Mexico, Paraguay, and Peru. That was their gross domestic product. Wow.
Teníamos más tendidos de vía de tren que la suma de todos los países de Latinoamérica. Éramos comparados con Alemania, con Estados Unidos y con Inglaterra. Y gente de todos los confines del mundo se escapaba de naciones que hoy envidiamos y cruzaron el océano para buscar una oportunidad en nuestras tierras. Un capataz podía aspirar a que su hijo fuera productor, un obrero a que su hijo fuera constructor, un trabajador analfabeto a que su hijo tuviera estudios y pudiera tener un trabajo calificado. Se trató de una explosión de actividad comercial productiva, de formación humana, demográfica y cultural, con escaso parangón en la historia de la humanidad. Pero en el pico de este proceso, bajo la premisa bien pensante de querer distribuir entre todos la riqueza producida, la dirigencia argentina comenzó a aplicar la mal llamada doctrina de la justicia social, que concibe que el Estado tiene que hacerse cargo de las infinitas necesidades de la gente.
Now he goes into the misnamed doctrine of social justice by which the the state has to take care of the people.
Yeah. That, if I'm not mistaken, the first government that pushed that agenda was in the 1920s. The first socialist government of Argentina, Irigoyen government from the Radical Party. It was radical for, well, socialist reelection, essentially.
Yeah, and of course that was when the virus was starting to spread everywhere. But yes, okay.
Yeah.
Una teoría que se pelea con la realidad porque, nos guste o no, las demandas son infinitas, pero los recursos siempre son finitos. Producto de esta forma de entender la relación entre el Estado y la economía, se aumentó el gasto público de manera brutal. Para financiar esa expansión del gasto, primero asfixiaron a los argentinos con impuestos. Cuando estos no alcanzaron, empezaron a quemar stock de reservas acumulados en nuestros años dorados. Cuando esto no alcanzó, empezaron a tomar deuda. Y cuando ya nadie nos quería prestar porque nos habíamos convertido en el máximo defolteador serial, comenzaron a imprimir dinero de manera ilimitada. Para que tengan dimensión de qué estamos hablando, desde 1949 la base monetaria en Estados Unidos se multiplicó 16 veces, mientras que en Argentina se multiplicó la astronómica cifra de 25.000 trillones de veces.
You compare the U.S. to Argentina since 1949. U.S. multiplied 16 times. Argentina multiplied 25,000
Trillion
times. Yeah.
Yeah. We had like two penetrations without war, so that tends to wreck the economic. The monetary base descended to hell, essentially.
Yeah. He mentioned inflation here. Yeah. So that's what he says. 25,000 trillion. That's wild. Which would actually also be 25 quadrillion, I believe. So.
Yeah,
No,
I guess.
No está mal el dato.
And the last, I'm not mistaken, it was 80 or 100 years. If you corrected the number and you take out the promedio of inflation each year, it was like something of 420% each year. Even when you, it was a pretty wild number when you make it.
Yeah.
So yeah, the destruction of wealth was unimaginable.
Yeah.
Sí, es un número real. No lo estoy inventando. Lo repito, la base monetaria se expandió 25.000 trillones de veces. Eso es el nivel de descalabro que pueden producir los políticos si les permite desviarse de los principios básicos de la economía de mercado. Y este ciclo no lo vimos una vez, sino una decena de veces. Se rompieron una y otra vez todas las reglas básicas de la economía para sostener el afán de los políticos de gastar lo que no tenemos. Y como resultado natural de estas medidas, vimos cómo nuestros ciudadanos comenzaron a empobrecerse sistemáticamente hasta caer al puesto 140 del mundo en el ranking del PBI per cápita, habiendo llegado a multiplicar la pobreza.
Fell to 140th place in the world in gross domestic product. That's wild.
Yeah, there's an issue with the measures because he said the real number, but until a few years ago, he will figure that Argentina will be like, I don't know, 100 in the 100th place, because those numbers usually take the official devaluation rate of the US dollar, when in reality you should check out the blue rate or illegal rate, which is the real one, because the people can actually buy that dollar. And yeah, that was 140. It was a lot.
Okay.
Por más de 10 veces en los últimos 50 años. Por 100 años repetimos este patrón tóxico, amantanando experimentos colectivistas sobre experimentos colectivistas. Y llegamos al año pasado a uno de los pisos más profundos de este ciclo, cuando asumimos el gobierno y encontramos una situación tan crítica que, de continuar todo como estaba, la economía se encaminaba a una hiperinflación que por lo menos hubiera dejado una hiperinflación del 15.000%. O sea que como economista y como argentino conozco en carne propia cómo jugar con fuego puede exterminar a un país de las vías del progreso y robarle 100 años de historia. Por eso, hace algunos meses en Davos, me pregunté ¿Cómo puede ser que desde la academia, los organismos internacionales, la política y la teoría económica se demonice un sistema económico que ha sacado de la pobreza más extrema al 90% de la población mundial? ¿Por qué Occidente quiere renunciar por su propia cuenta a los principios y creencias que lo hizo llegar a donde llegó? ¿Y por qué insiste con experimentos para los cuales hay ejemplos históricos de su fracaso, como es el caso argentino?
Now he's asking the question I think a lot of us are asking: why is the West doing this to itself? It really does make you wonder. Do you have any comments on that?
Well, in my experience in Argentina, the education, the academia in general, all the think tanks were over the years in some way or another related to the government. Let's say via subsidies or tax exemptions, or to each their own, I would say. But essentially, bonanza from different leaders and say, well, now let's please this sector, then let's please that sector. Essentially, manipulating education, doing a Gramscian scheme to, change the Overton view, essentially. So over time, everyone was thinking, well, socialist things. Even the more conservative one would say, yeah, expropriating this, expropriating that will not be so bad. So,
That's what's happening.
Then came,
Then
Milei came on, because he was such a weird thing, especially in television. They were already some classic liberal or libertarian economists, not exactly out loud, saying, no, this is wrong because of this or that. But Milei had a magic, I would say. It was something quite entertaining, really. Most of the channels at the time will bring him in, not only because of his economic perspective, but because he was pretty engaging. And at the beginning, for example, in many of these battles, I don't know if like The View or something like it, where there are multiple people and sometimes they all pin against one. Well, they will put like 10 against Milei, and Milei will review them all. And he had a character, he still has, but more chill these days. But yeah, he will say, no, you parasite, you vampire, blood-sucking vampire.
Yes, vampire.
He was wild.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he said in the face of senators, of governors, I mean, he went all in.
Yeah, here we go.
Claro que cuando hablamos de Davos no hablamos de cualquier foro. Se trata quizás de la institución global que ha tenido mayor influencia en orientar la dirección política y económica, tanto de naciones como corporaciones, sociedades y organizaciones no gubernamentales a lo largo de los últimos 40 años. Pero ocurre que quienes lideran Occidente se han olvidado de una verdad elemental, y es responsabilidad moral de quienes aún le recordamos defenderla y declamarla. Y esa verdad ineludible es que la libertad económica en busca del interés individual produce beneficios colectivos, y que por lo tanto el empresario que arriesga capital en pos de una ganancia es un benefactor social. Porque en un sistema que garantiza las instituciones clásicas del liberalismo, la propiedad privada, los mercados libres de intervención estatal, la libre competencia entendida como libre entrada y salida, la división del trabajo y la cooperación social, la única forma de ser exitoso es sirviendo al prójimo con bienes de mejor calidad a un mejor precio.
I love this, businessmen as social benefactors because they provide things that people want. Yes, that's exactly what they do.
And they do so at a very high risk at the beginning, of course.
Yeah, he points out there's also a lot of risk, but they're willing to take those risks, yes.
Sin embargo, quienes conducen las principales naciones y organizaciones de Occidente no dan suficiente crédito a esta idea y miran la economía desde un marco teórico que cree que el mercado es imperfecto, que produce fallos y que requiere de la intervención estatal para perfeccionarlo. El problema de esta concepción es que justifica intervenciones que traen más problemas que beneficios y atentan contra el crecimiento económico, porque no solo no resuelven el problema que pretendían resolver, sino que obstruyen lo que Hayek llamaba el proceso de descubrimiento. El mercado, presuponiendo la libre competencia y un sistema de precios libres con señales claras, constituye un mecanismo de extracción y transmisión de información en el que a mayor libertad
Here's where he makes it very important. He talks about how prices transmit information. They really are, way that markets talk to each other, that parts of the market talk to each other,
Yeah, especially in countries with high inflation, that system is broken. So that's why he truly hates inflation, because it wrecks the system. Is I will say the best way to wreck an economy is just drive up inflation. It destroys everything, because without price system you can allocate efficiently the resources, and therefore, well, you generate all kind of issues.
Same goes for price controls and other things. Yeah, it's all the information that goes through pricing.
Price control here were truly awful at some points. So two of the worst measures that you could possibly imagine, especially in countries of high inflation, and we experienced both of them multiple times. So
mejor funcionamiento. O sea que el mercado libre es un proceso de descubrimiento en el cual el capitalista encuentra sobre la marcha el rumbo correcto en la búsqueda constante del beneficio que se traduce en ofrecer bienes de mejor calidad a un mejor precio. Quienes briegan por el intervencionismo no solo impiden el funcionamiento virtuoso del mercado, sino que encima se felicitan a sí mismos e intercambian medallas de responsabilidad social en pomposas ceremonias, mientras que terminan promoviendo una agenda de valores que le abre la puerta poco a poco al socialismo y, en consecuencia, a la miseria.
He's really attacking the central planners here, just basically saying they're pompous, which is correct. And, he also, mentioned the discovery process, which is another thing that happens with the market. I mean, he's really going at him. Although he's probably got an audience here that would generally agree with him.
Yeah, and he's also pointed out that this is the beginning of the part, but he points out that all the intermediate solutions between socialism and capitalism, we will say, or economic libertarianism, are unstable, and therefore they will lean into socialism because, well, that's the thing that will promise the most. No, we're going to solve it with another regulation, with another law, with another this, with another that. So he's also, this part is not as blatant, but he's also pointing out to those centrists that will say, no, well, a little bit of intervention is okay. No, it's not. That's part of the issue why we suffer a lot of bad economic measures.
Yeah, past interventions just lead to more interventions. And of course, he also mentioned, that there's this belief that the market's not perfect, but the market is perfect. As he said, the market never fails.
Yeah, and also he announced this like in May, but he's with economic, I would say, advisor and friend of him, writing a new book, trying to solve a very famous issue of the neoclassical economic system, which is the market failures. Essentially, the issue with it was the fabric of, I would say, needles, and the concept of the Pareto distribution, which was the crescent production, or capitales crecientes. I don't remember the word, but it's a very famous issue for those that are economists and know this issue, neoclassical system. And he's writing a book trying to solve these two issues to make them work together. So maybe look up to it in the future. I don't know if by end of the year, but he will probably try to publish the book. Many economists I know are pretty excited to see what he will come out with.
Yeah.
Esta forma de entender los mercados es también la que detrás de un fenómeno que ya ha trascendido la moda y se ha vuelto un mandato en la cultura occidental, a la cual me quiero tomar un momento para comentar. Hablo de una cultura autorrepresiva y autoflagelante que se ha difundido en el mundo corporativo, en el mundo periodístico, en el mundo de la educación.
I love that. He says Western culture is a self-flagellation culture. He's basically saying we're beating ourselves up because of our successes.
Yeah, we are trying to essentially inflicting ourselves shame constantly.
Yeah, it's
Shame
like
for being successful. Shame for being good in many
Yeah.
cases even.
yeah, we're letting it. Yeah,
Y en el mundo del entretenimiento, una cultura donde producto de distintos tipos de coacción, todas directa o indirectamente promovidas por el Estado, se persigue al privado para que se someta a mandamientos de supuesta moral en cuestiones como el género, la cuestión racial o la cuestión ambiental, que muchas veces terminan atentando directamente contra la libertad y la capacidad de las empresas para generar riqueza. Se trata de conceptos que llevan al absurdo de castigar el mérito para premiar la diversidad, de regular la libre circulación de ideas para evitar ofender a algunas pocas almas sensibles, de demonizar el optimismo tecnológico por miedo al cambio climático. Son ideas y conceptos que castigan la ambición y premian la mediocridad.
so talking about punishing ambition, rewarding mediocrity, demonizing science, and then in the name of climate change, he's really going after a lot of things here. I think in a very courageous way, but so many people understand things like this.
Here, the thing that was most successful in being harmful for the society was the feminist movement, especially all the legal modifications they made on, I would say, like, I guess, punitive laws when, if someone denounced another one from being a rapist or something, the law was heavy in favor of the woman without presenting proofs. So it was pretty harmful for a few years. With some luck in maybe this administration or the next one, they will have it solved. But you need the Congress, and it's easier said than done having these types of law change. Not as bad as Spain, but yeah, he's going after a lot of people there, a lot of powerful organizations, we'll say.
Yes.
Que castigan el riesgo y premian al conservadurismo. En definitiva, son ideas que promueven pasiones tristes y bregan para que seamos versiones cada vez pequeñas de nosotros mismos, cuando son precisamente la innovación, la ambición, la codicia, la acción humana las que impulsan el desarrollo de nuestra especie. O sea, como civilización, habiendo visto de que somos capaces.
Even talks about innovation and greed. I mean, he understands rational self-interest. That is so wonderful.
Yeah. And when he speaks of conservatism, doesn't mean a conservative movement, but he speaks of those who perpetuate the bad regulation that had sent us to this place, not essentially core values. Just, you're still defending the rental laws, you stupid fool. Essentially.
Yeah. Well, there's always going to be risks in markets, and that's what he's saying. We need to at least not punish people for taking risks.
Essentially, yes.
Estamos eligiendo desconfiar de nuestra propia capacidad, negar nuestra propia virtud, nuestra propia identidad y cometer lo que es, a todas luces, un suicidio colectivo. Hoy, ya demasiado tarde en algunos lugares, vemos con horror los frutos que empiezan a dar estas ideas. Por ejemplo, esta semana aquí mismo, en Estados Unidos, con las decenas de miles de jóvenes a lo largo y a lo ancho de los campus universitarios, reivindicando el terrorismo islámico y promoviendo el antisemitismo. O sea, literalmente, la futura élite de Occidente enemistada con su propia cultura. Marx decía, en ese panfleto detestable que escribió con Engels, que el capitalismo llevaba en sí mismo el germen de su propia destrucción. Esperemos que, como el resto de las cosas que escribió, haya estado equivocado. Ahora, no se equivoquen. Yo sí creo que el sector privado tiene un mandato de responsabilidad social muy claro, pero no tiene que ver con hacerse el moralista o el culposo. La verdadera responsabilidad social del empresario es un efecto natural del funcionamiento libre de su propia actividad económica, el mandato de producir bienes y servicios.
Here he is again, saying that businessmen have a responsibility to defend free markets, and I think he's calling them out because businessmen haven't always defended free markets in a principled manner.
Yeah, and essentially the small or middle business, because big business usually do crony capitalism, so he kind of discards most of the time. But essentially, the ones who have a business with 10, 20 people, they should try to, don't say, oh, how good is the rental law? I mean, you can see wild things here. So he's trying to say, yeah, defend yourself, please, please.
Servicio de mejor calidad, mejor precio, ligado a la maximización de los beneficios. La responsabilidad social del empresario es ganar dinero y eso solamente lo puede hacer sirviendo al prójimo con bienes de mejor calidad a un mejor precio. Por lo tanto, los empresarios son benefactores sociales, lejos de las críticas que suelen hacerles los políticos gastadores y despilfarradores. Ese mandato redunda en la generación de mercados más competitivos, con sociedades mejor satisfechas y, en última instancia, no solo satisface demandas, sino también ensancha los horizontes de lo que el hombre quiere y puede hacer a través de la innovación tecnológica. O sea que ese mandato redunda al final del día en una tendencia a la excelencia humana y al enaltecimiento de nuestra especie. No es un mandato de moralina superficial que se cumple regulando el libre mercado. Es un mandato de gloria que se cumple desatándolo. Por el contrario, cuando el afán de algunos por regular obtura la pulsión humana por crear y le ata las manos, estamos ante un problema. Porque construir un futuro prometedor.
He's basically said that markets glorify excellence and, glorify innovations. That's so inspiring.
He's very techno-optimistic, always has been. So he constantly promotes human resources and especially technological advances because he says that's where economic growth is most displayed. So please to defend them and promote them because that will make us prosperous again.
Para la especie es imposible si hay ideas buenas que no importa lo buenas que sean, son consideradas demasiados heréticas para ser exploradas. Porque construir un futuro prometedor para la especie es imposible si sacrificamos el mérito, la competencia y los resultados en el altar de la diversidad, dado que fueron precisamente la libre circulación de ideas y un sistema de incentivos que promueve el esfuerzo y el mérito los pilares sobre los que se construyó Occidente. Entonces, quiero hoy reivindicar las grandes ambiciones de nuestra especie y nuestra civilización. Desde que existen los mercados libres, hemos cruzado frontera tras frontera. Hemos sacado al mundo entero de la pobreza en 250 años. Hemos puesto hombres en la Luna y ahora miramos a Marte. Y lo hemos hecho gracias a la ambición, la creatividad y al optimismo de hombres como ustedes, que se asocian entre sí en pos de la búsqueda de la propia felicidad. No tenemos que perder la fe en esa ambición primal que los humanos tenemos como guía. Somos una especie de exploradores, de creadores, de inventores.
I love how he talks about ambition and how we've, managed to put men on the moon and may put men on Mars, although it was a government program to put men on the moon, though I will point that out.
Yeah, but the technology, even if it was partially government implemented or created, the taxpayer money went from capitalism. So
yeah,
it's a market success anyways.
Yeah. Although Musk wants to take us to Mars, so that's he mentions Musk later in the speech.
No de burócratas. Y es el empresario aventurero, no el burócrata de escritorio, la clase de hombre que encarna en el presente esta cualidad atemporal del espíritu humano. Por eso no quiero dejar de celebrar el esfuerzo de mi amigo Elon Musk por pisar Marte, porque entendemos que la exploración espacial está a la altura de nuestro destino como especie exploradora, demasiado grande para estar confinados a este planeta. Tenemos la obligación moral de proteger los pilares que hicieron posible todo este edificio de ambiciones, logros y sueños. Esos pilares sobre los que está edificada la historia del progreso humano son la defensa de la vida, de la libertad y de la propiedad. Si los olvidamos o los damos por sentados, corremos el riesgo de perderlo todo. Miro a la Argentina con todos los cambios que estamos emprendiendo y veo que estamos a contramano del mundo, porque mientras que en el resto del mundo las ideas de la libertad están bajo asedio, en la Argentina se erige una fe renovada en ellas. Mientras Occidente gira hacia el control y hacia la imposición, la Argentina gira hacia la confianza de sus ciudadanos en el ejercicio de su libertad.
He's talking about how Argentina is developing more trust compared to the rest of the West. you think that's true now?
Yeah. One thing that is very surprising. I mean, I'm not too old, 25 now next year, but I'm surprised by the amount of young people, especially that will start, reading Hazlitt books or Milton Friedman books and trying to understand economics. Support the president. I mean, it's quite strange, and it has been a few years now that this phenomenon has spread and increasing quality and quantity. It's truly phenomenal. So even though this year will be a recession because you had to lower the public expenditure and the amount of money being printed, so you essentially uh, since sincere all the economic faults that they were currently in the process. Well, that takes a while, but I'm not mistaken, it was May or April, the economic activity was already recovering. Of course, until it's previous to the recession that started August of last year, it will take a while, but still it's pretty promising.
Yes,
But
it is.
one of the very, and one of the issues here, not exactly is taxes, which it's pretty heavy in this place, but regulations. So even if you are young and try to start a business, you kind of were forced to make it not so transparent or the- not make it legal essentially because you had to get permissions from the town hall, from the govern, from the provincial government or state government. I don't know, in some cases like the federal government too. So it will drive you nuts. The amount of hours you lose just on, you know, um, public work, bureaucratic processes were insane. Like 30, 60 hours depend on the market or the business you will lead were lost each week or each month in essentially permits or bureaucratic process. So yeah.
Yes. Okay. Well,
Mientras Occidente gira hacia el déficit, la burocracia y el Estado entrometedor, Argentina gira hacia la austeridad, hacia el ahorro y retira al Estado de la actividad económica. Mientras Occidente gira hacia el chamanismo económico y hacia formatos insostenibles de heterodoxia que ponen en peligro el futuro de todos, la Argentina vuelve al sendero de la razón, a las ideas del sentido común. Y lo hace con amplio apoyo en todos los estratos de la sociedad, porque después de décadas de recesión en Argentina, el consenso procapitalista es transversal a la sociedad. Por eso estamos pudiendo hacer el ajuste del Estado más rápido y más grande de la historia de la humanidad, sin perder un solo apoyo en el camino. Esto es porque la sociedad entendió que vale la pena hacer el esfuerzo que requiere dar un cambio de rumbo. El modelo del Estado grande es una cárcel y la sociedad argentina lo entendió. Por eso apoya la ley que estamos impulsando en el Congreso, que es el proyecto de reforma del Estado tributaria, fiscal y regulatorio más importante de los últimos 150 años. ¿Cómo puede ser que la fuerza política en mayor minoría parlamentaria de la historia democrática, en un contexto de penuria económica total, pueda impulsar la reforma más ambiciosa de la que se tenga memoria y lo haga con apoyo popular? Esto es porque la sociedad argentina exige un cambio de rumbo profundo y urgente para volver a abrazar las ideas de la libertad. Cuando tomamos el timón del Estado y de la economía argentina en diciembre, anunciamos desde el primer día que con nosotros se acababa el déficit y en consecuencia se acababa la emisión monetaria y la inflación. El establishment no nos quiso dar crédito y se dijeron muchas cosas. Se dijo que hacer un ajuste de más de 1 punto del PBI era imposible. Se dijo que tener déficit cero en el primer año era imposible. Se dijo que una política de tasas bajas no servía para reducir la inflación. Pero hemos desafiado estos pronósticos y estamos cumpliendo nuestros objetivos. En tan solo 5 meses logramos el primer trimestre con superávit fiscal y financiero en el sector público.
he talks about balancing the budget, and of course, the fiscal surpluses, and of course, how inflation's been lowered. So we definitely.
Yeah, now this month it
Yes.
was the first semester of economic surplus in the budget. The last time this happened, I don't know if we were in the fall like 10 or 20 years ago. So this time he did it without being, in default and not paying interest on debt. So yeah, he is truly making success there. fiscal policy is being more or less serious. It takes a while yet, but he's, awesome.
Yes, it is possible.
And it was very difficult in June because that's a month where the people demand a lot of dollars from the economy, and since there's still some financial restrictions, that could possibly make the budget, kind of not sustain themselves because there was a lot of demand and not a lot of economic movement. So the reserve of the central bank could be heavily consumed, and therefore I would say, the treasury will have to lend money to the central bank, and therefore making it possible to have a deficit that month. But they managed to stop that from happening with some economic policy.
Yeah.
Nacional luego de 20 años, habiendo heredado de la administración anterior un déficit consolidado de más de 15 puntos del producto entre déficit del Tesoro y déficit del Banco Central, lo cual es, sin exagerar, una hazaña de proporciones históricas, no solo en Argentina, sino a nivel mundial. Bajamos drásticamente el gasto público, reduciendo en un 76% las transferencias discrecionales a los estados provinciales. Ajustamos en un 87% la obra pública. Eliminamos el 50% de los cargos políticos, cerrando.
He eliminated discretionary transfers to the various, I guess, the provinces. What exactly is that about?
Essentially, the federal government will lend money to the different states or provinces if they need it for whatever reason. It was a discretion of the federal government lend those funds. And, they usually didn't explain where that money went. So, it was essentially a suspicion of corruption, like public works in general. They weren't very well supervised or audited. Therefore, he essentially suspended. He helped a lot with the public spending. Most of the governors in the beginning were against President Milei because they had to essentially balance the budget without money from the Federal Reserve. Because most of the money that the government would lend, it wasn't of tax recaudation, but because of the central bank will print money, and that money was then lent to them. So, that couldn't be sustained any longer. But it was essentially money that the federal government will lend to the governors for political reasons. Usually, government of the same party of the federal government, essentially.
Yeah, and then 50% of all political positions and other things. Yeah.
Yeah, most of the money went always to salaries, always.
Organismos innecesarios y eliminando sobre todas las cosas la pauta publicitaria, motivo por el cual escucharán hablar a un grupejo de periodistas hablar peste de nuestro gobierno, básicamente porque le tocamos el órgano más sensible del cuerpo, el bolsillo. Frenamos en seco el financiamiento del Tesoro con emisión monetaria y producto del ancla fiscal y monetaria, la inflación empezó a bajar y sigue bajando semana a semana desde hace 4 meses. En simultáneo, llevamos adelante una política de baja sistemática de tasas sin que el tipo de cambio ni la inflación se dispare, lo cual todo el establishment juraba que era imposible. Y todo esto lo hemos hecho con toda la política, la mayoría del periodismo y una buena parte del poder económico prebendario en contra, y sin los recursos jurídicos que le solicitamos al Congreso y con los que todos los presidentes de los últimos años han contado. Lo cual es esperable en parte, porque cada partida presupuestaria que recortamos hay un privilegio o negocio que le estamos quitando a algún político o a algún amigo del poder. Pero así, aún ante semejante adversidad, estamos cumpliendo con los resultados.
At that part that he was talking about, he meant the superpowers that each president, since the return of democracy in the 80s, has possessed to essentially, with a decree, regulate or deregulate whatever area he wanted. That was essentially the powers he meant: economic, financial, energetic, and so on and so on. And all the presidents since the last 40 years did possess, to varying degrees, that amount. And at that point in time, he still did not have the law, which was called the Bases Law, or the Law for Basis and Economic Recovery of the Argentine. Something like this should be translated. But essentially, that law allowed him to the president and the different ministries to essentially pass on decrees or normative that will deregulate, lower taxes, or eliminate restrictions in general without having to pass it for the Congress, essentially. They will, of course, sign the decree, enter in effect, and then a chamber of I guess it's the deputy and Senate. So they have each a dedicated chamber with the legislator that will review that decree and say, this is legal, this is not. But it will essentially speed up a lot of reforms. At this point in time, he didn't possess that and still managed to lower a lot of regulations and expenditure. Essentially, he went for public expenditure because it was the easiest thing he could manage without going to Congress.
Y los resultados se están acompañando. Todavía queda mucho trabajo por delante, pero tenemos un rumbo en el cual la mayoría de los argentinos confían y un plan para lograrlo. Tenemos por norte achicar el Estado para agrandar a la sociedad, teniendo un gasto público consolidado del 25% del PBI, 10 puntos menos que el de los Estados Unidos y la mitad del de Francia para tener punto de comparación. Tenemos por norte devolverles a los argentinos cada peso que ahorremos, primero eliminando la inflación y luego, el día de mañana, reduciendo los impuestos como consecuencia del crecimiento económico. Y tenemos por norte desarmar la maraña de regulaciones en la que se ha convertido la Argentina para liberar la actividad económica y desatar su fuerza productiva. Por eso, hemos sancionado una orden ejecutiva donde derogamos más de 350 leyes. Por eso estamos impulsando una ley que contiene reformas en el plano fiscal, laboral, previsional y tributario, incluyendo un régimen de promoción inédito para las grandes inversiones. En total, entre ambos instrumentos, habremos introducido cerca de 700 reformas estructurales en los primeros 5 meses del gobierno. Un programa de reformas 7 veces más grande que la reforma del Estado impulsada por el presidente Carlos Menem a principios de los 90, el último gran proyecto liberal que tuvo la Argentina. En otras palabras,
you mentioned Carlos Menem here. I mean, what do you think happened with Menem? Why didn't Menem work? Or why did that not work back then?
Menem was a president of the Peronist Party, which was with the Radical Party, the two main oppositionists, like Republicans and Democrats. And Menem was, I would say, I'm not exactly certain if I will compare him to Reagan, but his economic policies were, well, closer to a Republican than a Democrat during his term. But the main issue he possessed was public expenditure. He couldn't be able to completely cut it out, and therefore he incurred in deficit. And especially in middle or late second term of him, so end of the 90s almost, the public expenditure wasn't correctly balanced, and there were multiple economic crises in the region and in the world. I guess it was the tequila crisis, the Russian crisis, I guess it was. Essentially it caused a lot of economic turmoil that sent the balanced budget to hell. They weren't able to pay the debt to death. I guess it was the IMF and other, I'm not mistaken, it's lending funds or something alongside that. That essentially caused an economic crisis, and with the change of government in the 2000s, wasn't solved. A lot of economic turmoil followed, and socialist measures were taken, very bad ones. But essentially the problem of Menem government was corruption and public expenditure, if you want to summarize it. But essentially he went very hard, especially on deregulating the economy at the time. He mentions the presidential decree of President Menem, which was one of the largest in our history. The one he signed in December of last year was, I guess, 2 times or 3 times bigger than that one. And then the economic reforms that he sent to the Congress are more ambitious than the one that Menem sent. But the main issue of the Menem administration was the public expenditure. because he managed to stabilize the economy and prevent the hyperinflation of Alfonsín, essentially, because he neared a 5,000% inflation year to year when he assumed. He managed to lower it. Then he hit at the beginning of his term 2,000% inflation that year. And once the conversion process or convertibility process was initiated, which made 1 peso equivalent to $1. In 2 years, they lowered inflation to 2-3% annual. But until then, he faced a lot of turmoil, and that was when most of the economic reforms were passed on, especially deregulations or elimination of taxes. All expenditure also, but it wasn't enough. And over time, that, crashed his system.
Yeah.
Estamos haciendo realidad el programa reformista más ambicioso de los últimos 150 años, porque la única manera de sacar el 60% de los argentinos de la pobreza es con crecimiento económico, y solo hay crecimiento económico con libertad. No hay otra manera. Para nosotros, la única tarea del Estado es proteger la vida, la libertad y la propiedad de los argentinos, para que cada uno pueda ser arquitecto de su propio destino. Esta es nuestra visión. Es una visión parecida a la que sostuvieron todos los países prósperos de Occidente en los momentos grandes de su historia. La tarea del Estado no es poner plata inventada en el bolsillo de la gente, sino asegurar las condiciones macroeconómicas y jurídicas para que el sector privado pueda desarrollarse por su cuenta. Un Estado que vela por la vida, la libertad y la propiedad de los individuos, y un sector privado pujante que arriesga, apuesta por el país y genera riqueza. Nosotros establecemos las bases. El sector privado se encarga del resto. Por eso, a esta presentación de quiénes somos y qué queremos para nuestro país que le he traído hoy, les quiero agregar una invitación, tanto a todos ustedes como también a sus pares del mundo y de la Argentina. Después de décadas de estancamiento, la Argentina tiene todo dado para emprender un proceso de convergencia económica que nos coloque a la par de las grandes potencias del mundo. La convergencia económica se da cuando los países que tienen menores ingresos per cápita crecen más rápido que los desarrollados hasta el momento en que logran alcanzarlos. ¿Por qué? Porque somos desde hace décadas una olla a presión, hirviendo con la tapa cerrada. Lo único que hay que hacer es destaparla y reanudar lo que Hayek llamaba la tarea del mercado como proceso de descubrimiento. Para nosotros, reanudar ese proceso de descubrimiento va a generar un salto de crecimiento brutal, porque las posibilidades de crecimiento tienden a ser mayores cuanto más extensas sean las capacidades subutilizadas de un país. Desde este punto de vista, si en un país la utilización efectiva de sus recursos fue impedida durante décadas y de un día para el otro se normaliza, lo lógico es esperar tasas de crecimiento enormes, proporcionales a todo lo que hay por explotar. Por eso, la baja capitalización de la economía, fruto de 20 años de un populismo empecinado en destruir el capital, va a generar oportunidades de inversión enormes para aquellos que apuesten por el país. Por lo tanto,
He talks about how policies have been destroying capital in the country. That was certainly.
Yeah. And also credit, especially credit in this country, long-term credit was none after 10, 20 years of economic mismanagement and high inflation or rising inflation each year.
Yeah.
So that's one of the first things that was recovered during his administration. After he balanced the budget in January, most of the banks were once again free to lend money to private sector instead of buying treasury bonds. So long-term and short-term credit went back. Of course, at high rates, but they are lowering each month because, the central bank is lowering the interest rate too, and therefore they follow too.
Argentina no solo podría mostrar altas tasas de crecimiento como consecuencia de las oportunidades por descubrir dado su bajo nivel de desarrollo, sino que además, ante la brutal destrucción de capital ocurrida en el pasado, eso daría un enorme retorno con solo poner en marcha las ideas y proyectos ya descubiertos, pero entorpecidos por capas de regulación innecesaria. Así, mediante la recomposición del ahorro fiscal, una drástica reducción de la carga tributaria y afianzando el respeto por los derechos de propiedad, haremos que alcanzar el desarrollo deje de ser un sueño para volverse una realidad. Hoy estoy acá para decirles que Argentina está preparada para ese enorme desafío. Estoy convencido, sin la más mínima duda, que Argentina tiene todas las condiciones para ser la nueva Meca de Occidente. Es un país seguro, alejado de cualquier frontera conflictiva, en un mundo que cada día se aleja más de la paz. Es un país abierto a entablar relaciones comerciales con todo el mundo, que es además la mayor garantía posible para perpetuar la colaboración y alejarse de la guerra. Tenemos ventajas comparativas en donde elijamos mirar. Tenemos la tierra más fértil del mundo. Fuimos revolucionarios en la siembra.
He's talking about all of Argentina's advantages, like fertile land, staying out of war, their location. I mean, he also talks about Argentina's mineral resources that they really haven't utilized in a few minutes here too.
Yeah. Most of the minerals here were not utilized because of ecologist laws, essentially. So there's a lot of mineral reserves or minery to explode yet.
Siembra directa y como uno de los sectores agroindustriales más desarrollados del mundo. Tenemos una cordillera rica en litio, plata, oro y cobre, minerales que la economía global necesita y que por negligencia, falta de inversión y falta de emisión nos hemos resistido a explotar. Tenemos un mar abundante en recursos citícolas. Tenemos una conexión directa con la próxima frontera humana, que es la Antártida. Y tenemos una concentración de diversidad geográfica y ecológica de la cual solo 2 o 3 países del mundo podemos hacer alarde, con montañas, con desiertos, con glaciar, con bosque, con selva, con playa.
He talks about, lithium, gold, silver, copper, and he also talks about, Antarctica being the last frontier on Earth. He wants to go down and explore Antarctica.
Yeah. Essentially, the first, if I'm not mistaken, the first base that was made in the Antarctica was made by the Argentine government. I'm not mistaken, 80 years ago, it was planned. It was part of the plan to essentially populate the Antarctica, but different governments with bad economic policy, they not funded that program. So it's just one base there with I don't know if it's 100 people living there or more, but it's part military, part civil military base. Say.
What do the Penguins think of all this?
They are happy alongside the Wolves. Yeah, Wolves.
Yeah.
I didn't. The whales. That was because in the south you have a lot of tourist towns with whales observation and so on.
Yeah, I mean the South America is the one continent besides Antarctica where you actually can see penguins. It's really
yeah. They are pretty cool.
Con altiplano, con lagos, esteros, estepas y vastas llanuras que se pierden en el horizonte. Y tenemos también la ventaja comparativa más importante de todas: capital humano de primera categoría, recursos formados en universidades locales que son líderes de la región, el país con más premios Nobel de Latinoamérica y al mismo tiempo el país con más unicornios per cápita de la región. Y esto no es menor, ya que se trata de ciudadanos entrenados al calor de una vida entera de volatilidad económica. ¿Cómo va a haber otro pueblo mejor preparado que el argentino si el argentino nunca le quedó más alternativa que vivir escapándose al asedio del Estado para poder vivir en paz? Y hoy, por primera vez en 150 años y a contramano del mundo, cada vez más libre, la Argentina.
He also talks about just the people of the country. He says they're smart, they're able to win Nobel Prizes and stuff like that. I mean, I guess that's pretty much the truth. I mean, of course, it does make you wonder why they voted for horrible policies, but
Yeah, society and individual success are very different things. But the issue was mostly, socialist policies and very popular or prolific political movements that were pretty bad on economic policy. But one thing that he mentions is that essentially our people are pretty resilient towards the state because we are pretty good at evading taxes or well, creating inventive ways or creative ways to essentially make our life less miserable because of the state. So therefore, you have a lot of creativity when you unleash them on other places where they are not as restrictive. One will say that's part of the reason it's playing so many successful stories. You would say.
Yeah. Got about 4 minutes left here.
Se convierte día a día en un país que es cada día más libre. Por primera vez en 150 años estamos generando las condiciones para convertir todos los dones que Dios nos dio en una promesa de prosperidad. La tarea del capitalista es descubrir, la tarea de la humanidad misma es descubrir, y son las naciones como la nuestra que nacen de ese espíritu de descubrimiento lo que mejor la encarnan. No es casualidad que las economías más dinámicas de Occidente en los últimos 100 años haya sido la economía americana, con Estados Unidos a la cabeza. No es casualidad que el foro de los burócratas se realice en Europa y el foro de los descubridores se realice acá en Estados Unidos. Digamos, tenemos espíritus distintos.
He talks about this discoverers forum in the US and this bureaucrats forum in Europe. I think that's very interesting. We have different spirits.
Yeah, and the funding of our nations were quite different. So that inspired a lot of different views on essentially life.
Argentina hoy sigue siendo un país, una nación, un pueblo ávido por descubrir y ser descubierto, como lo fuimos a fines del siglo XIX. Y estamos listos, ya comenzamos la carrera para emprender un salto cuántico en materia de producción y desarrollo. La ventana de oportunidades para nuestra nueva fiebre del oro no será eterna, es hoy, es ahora. Por eso les digo también a los empresarios argentinos, no se duerman en sus laureles, porque encontrarán que hay actores de afuera con más capital y mayor capacidad de asumir riesgo, dispuestos a hacer las inversiones que el país necesita. Finalmente, quiero concluir estas palabras invitando a todos aquí presentes, que son los héroes de la historia del progreso de la humanidad, a que si creen como yo en la superioridad del capitalismo de libre empresa, que si creen como yo que Occidente se camina a un lento pero seguro retroceso, que si creen como yo que el mérito, la ambición, la libertad y la innovación y el optimismo son valores esenciales de la especie humana que deben ser premiados, quiero invitarlos a que apuesten por Argentina. Ayúdenme ustedes, que son el progreso humano encarnado, a hacer de la Argentina la nueva Roma del siglo XXI, a hacer de la Argentina una tierra de oportunidades para todos aquellos que estén dispuestos a habitar nuestro suelo. Son ustedes los que pueden demostrarle a los burócratas del mundo que están destruyendo Occidente, que las ideas de la libertad son la única forma de alcanzar la prosperidad. En este sentido, también les quiero señalar, que me parece muy significativo, unas palabras del Papa Benedicto XVI, o sea, Joseph Ratzinger, que decía: Occidente siente un odio por sí mismo que es extraño y que solo puede considerarse como algo.
Interesting that he's quoting Pope Benedict here and talking about how Pope Benedict said the West hates itself. Of course, I know, of course, Pope Benedict was certainly a lot better than the current Pope.
There's a lot to say about his views, but well, they come more than politically because of his Jesuit, essentially, instead of because he was part of the Peronist movement. I mean, his political views, but yeah, Milei is also very religious, or more like religious studies, more like actually Orthodox. But in recent years, he started studying the Torah because it's a very interesting story about. It was one of his students on economic. I think it was microeconomics that made very interesting question to him and asked him where those ideas come from, and he said that because, well, when he studied the Torah with his I guess rabbi, they will take a paragraph or I don't know, it's that short phrase, and study it over the weekend or the week. Therefore, will contemplate it from multiple angles, and then he applied the same principles to, well, when he was studying economics, and made President Milei very interesting questions. Therefore, he started studying also the Torah, not only for religious matter, but because he's very curious about economics in general and history. So therefore, he's actually pretty, I will say, wise on multiple topics, and not only Austrian economics, but Keynesian economics, classical economics, neoclassical economics. He never discriminates on the views so long as it's economics or history related. We'll say. So yeah, he's pretty competent and wise, I will say.
Algo patológico. Solo ve de su propia historia lo que es censurable y destructivo, al tiempo que no es capaz de percibir lo que es grande y puro. Por ello les pido, volvamos a abrazar las ideas de la libertad con orgullo. Estemos orgullosos de ser emprendedores, orgullosos de ser empresarios, digamos, porque son los verdaderos benefactores sociales, son los que crean riqueza, son los que han sacado el mundo de la miseria. Por lo tanto, digamos, le pido que además nos acompañen a los argentinos para este renacer de Occidente. Finalmente, quiero darles las gracias a todos, que Dios bendiga a los argentinos, que la fuerza del cielo nos acompañen y como no podía ser de otra manera. ¡Viva la libertad, carajo! Hello.
He's always putting his thumbs up. He always looks like he's having fun, you know. Really,
He enjoys all of the speeches he gives. He's deeply enjoying it. He doesn't come or go to places that will, these days at least, mistreat him. He wants he goes there and talks about what he likes and tries to make people see why this is so good.
yeah. Yeah, he's really, but I think he enjoys talking to people in general. It seems like he enjoyed, you know, I mean, sometimes you'd see him smiling during the debates. I mean, he's smiling so much. I think there's so many things.
He's really happy.
Yeah. And, you know, he also talks about he talks about the 150 million without getting angry. He really, I mean, he seems like as really he's got such a personality that I think our movement needs. I wish we could
he's pretty chill in general. I have friends that met him, and his personality is quite, I will say, calm in general, but he's very passionate. And when he sees injustice, for example, when he was a TV pundit, that was the word I was searching for. He met with a lot of socialists, which he will not, I will say, dislike because of their views, even though he did not agree with them, but because they were dishonest or hypocritical. So that was what triggered him. Or much worse, when they say he was a socialist. That was an insult.
Oh yeah, it's amazing to watch this happen. It really gives me faith in the world again. It's sometimes it seems like the only one, and I've been to your country. It's a wonderful place. Seems like a place where I could end up. I mean, you know, and lately we've had some things also, you know, it looks like he's got some more powers now where he can do even more deregulation. And from it sounds like he's also going to get a much friendlier Chamber of Deputies next year.
Yeah. That's why his party is working so hard this year to essentially make it a national movement, because last year he won, but because he made a lot of alliances with provincial movements that will allow him to essentially be elected. So now he's making it his own party, the one that has provincial recognition, to be, you know, more able to put people of his party instead of having to negotiate with people that will not usually agree. Essentially, to make certain that the chamber next year, when the elections happen, is most pure than, well, the current one. Because the current one, if he were to be elected, I mean, not as many senators or deputies will be from his party, and therefore people from he has confidence in, but we will be from other alliances with other agendas, therefore less likely to support his movement for deregulation, tax exemption, or eliminations. I mean, he has very big ideas for the country. Imagine he managed to pass along with the decree at the current law that is being enforced. I mean, there's people making the regulation for the implementation of these laws. He has another 4,000 laws to deregulate, eliminate, or change.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of reforms still, and this is speaking of the first generation of reform, because he looks at the state and says to properly reform this, you need 2 generation of reforms. The first one will be all expenditure, deregulation, and tax elimination or reduction. The second will be the one when he treats all the issues related to what's the word, retirement funds and so on. And the last one will be to further reduce the government, but that will be 20 years from now. And in the best of cases, he will be elected for 8 years. So 4 now, this first term, and another 4 on the second. So he's working very hard not only to pass the laws and make the country more free, but to make certain that his party, when he's gone, has good successors. Because the economic success of Bonanza that we will experience, consequence of all the good measures he's preventing, will last a long time. And if another party, a socialist party, comes in, they will misuse this Bonanza and then again repeat the history. And that's one of the things he is most worried about, I would say. I mean, he doesn't say it, but it's quite logical if you start thinking about it, because not many successful presidents or leaders in general had a good successor. So,
Yeah.
and he tries to keep the party with people that are experts in their area, but also relatively young, so that they are not as easily misled or corrupt. I will say so, because at least one of the people that I have met in current years that are on politics, at least corrupt or so, are 50 years or older. The younger ones are pretty dumb in general, so they are easy to pinpoint, we'll say. I guess
Yeah.
I will say that will be one thing he will consider. But that's a personal view, not the one from the government. But it
Yeah,
will surprise me.
Yeah, well, that's and things are looking good right now. Well, that's really about all I wanted to talk for right now. It's been great having you on Chinchilla. Where can we find you on the net? Just go to Twitter or what?
Yeah, in Twitter, I will write the arroba, or if you have it, arroba. La Chinchilla Fin, I will say, or my name. It's a lot longer and it's in Spanish, because I mostly just retweet things I like. I don't usually post a lot, but I do
Yeah.
enjoy watching more of the news. I usually use Twitter more like a channel rather than social media.
Yeah, but you had some good insights on some things I said. So I said, I should get this guy on here sometime. So I figured we, I got a few more speeches I need to analyze. So, and this is the 49th
thank you.
edition. This is the 49th edition of the Javier Milei Show. So I may try.
Nice.
Yeah. So yeah, it's a lot of good stuff out there. So Will, thank you. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel, give it a thumbs up. Go buy my novel, Escape from the Village. Check out my Substack. Thank you. Muchas gracias, Chinchilla. And I'm Chris Baker, and we're out.